one of the things that my research has shown me is an affirmation of something I already knew, but I'm now really, really extra hard with it because I now have the evidence that supports my intuition, which is that schools were not designed for the success of Black and brown children.
You are now part of a social experiment.
See now where my limit is, only got no ohs. It's like they just wanna see you struggle. I swear they don't wanna see you shine. They don't. It's like they just want you to bleed and they want you to fall. They don't want you to be where the streets are paved with gold.
Welcome to MasterMine, the home of Black excellence and self-mastery. Here's your host, Mr. G.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today on the journey towards self-mastery. Our next guest is an educator repping BK in the Bronx. He's a researcher, an activist, an author, a public speaker, and an entrepreneur. He's a professor and chair of the Ph.D. program at the University of Southern California. He holds a Ph.D. in urban education with a concentration in mathematics, science, and technology, a master's degree in both natural sciences and education, and a bachelor's in physical anthropology, biology, and chemistry. He was recently named one of the 27 people bridging divides in the United States by Time magazine and the Route 100 list of most influential African Americans. He's the author of numerous award-winning works, including the award-winning Urban Science Education for the Hip Hop Generation and the New York Times bestseller for white folks who teach in the hood, and the rest of y'all too. He has 2 new books out now, Ratchetdemic, Reimagining Academic Success, and STEM Make Dream. He's known for merging the elements of hip-hop into education with his hip-hop ed program. And for the past 10 years, he has hosted a weekly Twitter space discussing the connections between hip-hop and education. Let's welcome today our guest, Mr. Dr. Chris Emdin, to the program. Dr. Emdin,
thank you for having me, beloved. I'm glad to be here with you and looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, sir, man. We're just speaking a little bit, man, about the timeliness of your book. When I read it for white teachers that teach in the hood, and the rest of y'all too, man, actually was teaching in the hood when I read that. So it was right on time, man. So I definitely appreciate that. And just going through your work. And I feel like, you know, what you've laid out so far has been really unique for specifically, I think, Black educators to be in a space that is mostly white. And what you're telling us is that you should be yourself. You should connect with your kids, and you should, you know, go above and beyond and do all these things that we're told we shouldn't be doing. So definitely kudos to you, man, for the work that you're doing, and definitely has inspired me as an educator.
Thank you, brother. That means the world to me. I do my work for the general population in education because I feel like that field requires a grand overhaul for it to be effective for Black and brown children. But in particular, I do the work for those of us who understand the intricacies of the Black experience. I mean, who've been there, who've been in the Bronx, who've, been in the hood and understand the dynamics about those populations in a way that education theory or programs of education, they just don't get. And so when somebody who's been in the space says that the work resonates, it matters so much more because in many ways, that's who I do it for.
Appreciate it, man. So we got a lot to tackle, man.
Let's get to it.
So much data, so much research, so much life experience, man, that we got to get into, man. So before we kick it all off, man, you got to walk us through, the early days in Brooklyn, in the Bronx. I don't know which one came first. And, who was the young Chris Emdin, man? Who was little Chris coming up in the neighborhood, man?
You know what's so funny? This already has turned into a really already revealing conversation for a lot of folks because I rep the Bronx so heavy. Like I feel my X's up wherever I go. And very few people know or really understand that I came up in Brooklyn. And, the reason why I resonate so much with the Bronx is just because my work professionally and intellectually, and even who I am as a person has always been about rooting for the underdogs and for representing for the populations and speaking for and with the populations who've been most marginalized. So even though my earliest experiences were from Brooklyn, Brooklyn gets mad shine. The Bronx gets slept on. And I moved to the Bronx when I was 13, was in Brooklyn prior. But 13 is when you come of age, is when you really start making sense of the world, is when you start really making friends, is when you start really hanging out, is when you go through adolescence. And so the most formative parts of my life where I was able to be aware of the dynamics were in the Bronx. Before that, I came up in Brooklyn, East Flatbush, East 21st Street. And, my Brooklyn days were just prototypical Brooklyn days. And when I tell tales of Brooklyn in the 90s or the 80s, late 80s, it's not one that most people, talk about. Like most people talk about the doom and the gloom and the crack epidemic and, the gangsters and the thugs. And like I came up in Brooklyn, East Flatbush, but all I saw was beauty and magic. You know what I mean? Like Jewish populations and Black populations sort of figuring it out, Jamaican beef patties and dollar vans, hip hop blasting through the cars driving past. Stylistically, we was rocking the Travel Fox and the first era Jordans. The sky seemed bluer. The music seemed more pure. My Brooklyn experience was one that was very idyllic. And in many ways, it's like, I didn't think it was bad because it was good. And I only started discovering that people viewed that experience in that era as bad because of what the media said and other folks said. But my Brooklyn upbringing was beautiful. When I came to the Bronx at like 13, I then became aware of like gangs, and what blocks you could go on and what you can't go on, and really like guarding and protecting yourself and things like that. But even in that experience, there was camaraderie with my peoples that came together that was dope. That's when I first discovered my skill set as an MC, when I moved to the Bronx. And so my childhood experience was beautiful in many ways. My adolescent experience was complicated in many ways. But I've always been who I am now. Like if you talk to anybody who knew me when I was younger and knows me now, they'll just say, oh, he's an older version of the same person he was. You know what I mean? Like I've always been very expressive. I've always asked a lot of questions. I've always rooted for the person who was like wrote off. Like, I hate bullies. I've always hated bullies. And I've always thought about the urban experience in beautiful and magical ways because I've always seen the beauty of my surroundings. And I was raised to see magic in everything that's around me. And so I've always been that dude. And I give you a little extra plug, that most folks don't know. I also I come from a family of immigrants. I was born in the States. Actually, originally born in Maryland, Tacoma Park, Maryland, until I was like 3. But I come from Jamaican heritage and an African heritage. You know what I mean? My peoples are from Jamaica, from Yard. You know what I mean? And my people are from Nigeria. You know what I mean? Like Yoruba, strong Yoruba folks. You know what I mean? And so that's also been a piece of my identity is my Jamaicanness, my Africanness, my Bronxness, and my hoodness. And, all those things are what makes me who I am.
Yes, sir. And we definitely got to include the type of student that you were and what your classroom experiences were like, because, that's a lot of your work is based on the classroom experience and for educators, for students, for parents and things like that. So what was your classroom experience coming up like?
I went to high school in one of the most revered urban public schools in the country. I went to Brooklyn Tech. You got a test to get in there, it's a very well revered and respected school. I actually write about Brooklyn Tech and my experience there in my book Ratchetdemic, which don't tell nobody. I like for white folks, but Ratchetdemic is my favorite thing I've ever written is Ratchetdemic. I mean, that book is my heart. I just
finished that one, and I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah, man. I like, people love different pieces of my work. People are like, oh, I love that article he wrote, or I like his first book, or I like for white folks, but Ratchetdemic is my heart. But yeah, man, I went to Brooklyn Tech, and in Brooklyn Tech, there was a lot of crews, right? They were they were like the Asian American students, the Black students, the Caribbean students, the jocks, the academics, and then everybody else. And I was the everybody else. You know what I mean? Like I was a hip hop kid. All we did was play spades and freestyle, in the cafeteria. And hip hop. That's where I fell in love with hip hop. Is like I discovered that I had a gift to be able to rhyme and command, and that just changed everything for me. And so that was my high school experience. It was a really beautiful experience. I used to roll with a crew called D-Mob. Still hang out with those cats till today. And we were just a bunch of misfits, like a bunch of kids who didn't fit anywhere else, who all got together and created their own little squad. And those were my family. So today, my best friends till today were part of that crew. Shout out to Dr. Napoleon Wells, my very best friend. And from that era. And so that was my high school experience. My middle school experience, I went to middle school in Brooklyn, obviously. And all I really remember from middle school was, we were scared of the big kids. I had to take the B41 bus across Flatbush past Erasmus, and Erasmus was supposed to be the bad school, and we was always scared of the big kids at Erasmus, and they were always lovely to us. I've always had teachers that I think were good, but didn't really understand me. And I think maybe that's why I do the work I do right now, is because I know there are many young people in schools who are misunderstood, and there are things that I wish that they had done for me. And I work with teachers to be able to do that for the next generation, because I was lucky enough that despite the fact I wasn't really understood, I was able to sort of make it through it. And I don't want my accidental ability to make it through to have to be somebody else's fate. Like, our young people should not be successful by accident. It should be intentional. It should be deliberate. There are things we can do to make sure that they have a good experience. And my work is really based on my experiences as a young person, and my desire to ensure that the next generation of young people don't have to accidentally make it, that they make it on purpose. And yeah, man, that's my middle and high school experience.
Got it. I'm like, curiosity's kicking in right now. I'm like, were you like throwing paper balls in the back of teachers' heads and things like that? Like, what do you mean? Like, you didn't fit in? Like, were you?
Man, it wasn't even that. Like, I just think that I've always been a curious human being. So I'm the cat they'd be like, yo, Columbus discovered America. I'm like, yo, but why do you say that? And I keep asking why. It's like I got an answer that made sense. And usually I got, because that's what it is, or that's what the book says. And I'm like, nah, that once my curiosity was ebbed by an adult who didn't understand that I wanted real answers, then I got frustrated. And then my frustration got manifested in a whole bunch of different ways. So, man, I remember once, shout out to Mr. Kalen, wherever you are, Brooklyn Tech. Like, I used to throw water balloons in class at this dude's head. I remember at some point I just stopped going to certain classes. Like, if I asked you questions and you couldn't give me an answer that made sense to me, then in my head you was a sucker. And if you was a sucker, then you couldn't teach me anything. Like, I could only learn from somebody I respect. And if you've lost my respect, then it was over. And sometimes the respect is not only about like not having the answers. Like, respect is just about like that you value me, or that you say, yo, I'm not really sure. That's a good question, man. Like, I would respect that person, but a person who said, 'cause I said so, or 'cause that's the way the book says it, I know that to me, it was insulting my intelligence, and that always frustrated me. And that was the trigger to everything else. Because then I'll just start wilding out, And I had some good experiences in high school. I had some negative experiences, like there was a suspension or two, but there was also, high report card grades. And Chris is really intelligent. It just ran the gamut. And it really depended on the individual who was in front of me and whether or not they had the ability to be able to pull from me my actual desire, which was to learn.
That makes sense, man. Now I could kind of put the pieces together over who you are right now. Appreciate that.
All love.
So looking at the college experience, man, you decided to focus your attention in science, and, you became a scientist in the whole nine. And then you ended up changing up your career path. And you mentioned this in Ratchetdemic, where you started thinking about teaching, and you went up to your mom and you told your mom you wanted to be a teacher. So walk us through that conversation and what was going on at the time, from going to the prestige of something like being a scientist to like, you want to be a teacher?
Yeah, bro. Like, so what I've come to understand now, when I think back on the experience, is that I've always been a teacher. I've always seen the beauty and the magic in being able to delve deeply into a topic with people who are around me, where we all learn with and for and from each other, which is why I've loved hip. When you're in a cipher, you got to pay attention to everybody's rhyme. You got to be studying their body language. You've got to be able to be thinking about what you want to do. And you've got to be able to do something that engages everyone. That's teaching. It's like, I've always been a teacher, but because of the way the society demeans that powerful and beautiful profession, I've always run away from it. And after I had a very choppy high school experience and I got to college and had a teacher in college that really turned me on to science and made me understand, like, yo, you can do this. And I really believe, like, I love science, but I feel like I love the reason why I gravitated towards science is because science was the first academic subject where like a professor or somebody in charge let me know that I was good at it. And I was like, what? Like I've just been looking for affirmation. So when the affirmation came in science, I was like, word, I must be a scientist. And, triple majored and did all those things and, was studying the sciences, but my soul has always been in the classroom. And, when I discovered that and I shared that with my family, they were like, what? You're a scientist. You're so smart. You're like, why would you want to do that? And I really think that was based on the way society has framed teaching and the way that society reveres the sciences. Like, oh my gosh, it's the thing. And then we demean teaching. And so there are these sort of polar opposites. And people fail to recognize that, to me, science and education are so closely related. The purpose of science is to be able to interrogate phenomena in the world and make sense of them. The purpose of teaching is to interrogate the complexities of who children are and be able to turn them on to be able to change the world. To me, teaching is a science. Teaching is the ultimate science. And the best scientists are able to teach the world about their research. And so, like, you think about it, like one of my OGs, Neil deGrasse Tyson, the reason why he's such a dope scientist is because he can take complex scientific ideas and relate that to the public, which makes him a better scientist. Right. So the best scientists are educators, and the best educators understand the science of what they're doing. So it's like, I was able to just stumble into like a marrying of my loves. And, I got the stuff I got from the people around me until they saw the joy that education and teaching brought me. Like I love my craft, man. Ain't nothing in the world I'd rather do than what I do. To be able to see a young person's eyes widen when they finally get a topic, man, it's a high, right? Like, to be able to hear, I always say this when I give speeches sometimes, I'm like, when you hear that, the first time you hear a kid say, oh, now I get it. Like that sound like angels. You know what I mean? It sounds like a breakbeat. It sounds like the first time I heard Party and Bullshit by Biggie. Like it touches your soul. And I think when the people around me realize that he's really built for this, their perception about the craft I've chosen changed. And when they see the joy in my heart for the joy that it sparks in the hearts of other people, they've come to appreciate it more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That is powerful. There's the realities and the complexities, which you talked in your book too, Ratchetdemic, about that first year teaching experience. I don't know any teacher that had an amazing first year teaching experience, by the way.
I was trash. I was trash.
So walk us through that, first year experience, like some of those highlights that you think back on, like that stood out to you, man, and how you grew from that.
Yo, my first job, I taught middle school math and science at CIS 148. It's since been closed. They closed that joint way long ago. Charles R. Drew Academy, 3rd Avenue. You know what I mean? In the Bronx, right across the street from the projects. And my heart wasn't teaching, but you know what it is? Why your first year is so tough for people is because your passion has to match up against years of dispassionate teaching that the kids have experienced. So you're going in there to change the world, and they've had 8 years, 9 years, 7 years, 6 years of people breaking their heart. So they're so skeptical about your enthusiasm that they have to test you more than they would test somebody who they expect to break their heart. Like, if I've had, I went to teach 7th grade. They've had their heart broken for 6 years. And so when I come in, like, I'm not like them, they're so apprehensive. It's like dating somebody who got their heart broke. The first time they get into a relationship with a real one, they're like, are you for real? I don't trust you. They checking your phone. You know what I'm saying? They're checking your social media. You know what I mean? They ask you questions. You know what I mean? Like they're more critical of you because of their past experiences. When you go to school to teach for the first time with a heart to teach, the students are more critical of you because they think that you're like everybody else they had. And so because of that, they actually give you their worst selves, not who they are. They gave you who you are. If they gave you who they were, you'd be all right. But they gave you their worst selves because they're testing to see if you're real or not. And that's hard when you're just getting in there. Yeah. So you're like, yo, this is how this is all the time. Like these kids, so you're coming with your best self and they're coming with their worst self, and the two come together and it's hell. Because the reason why you notice is if you make it past that first year, or if you make it past the first 6 months, you're like, these kids ain't so bad. They was trying to test me. But you gotta make it past that period first before you know. And so, man, 148 was wild. And why I say that it was wild is because these kids had their heart broken so many times that they just had to lash out, and they was lashing out. You know, I remember there was a story at 148 where a couple kids went and started burning down the bulletin boards, like literally got a lighter and set fire to the bulletin boards in the hallway.
Wow.
And I was like, yo, these kids are mad bad. I also had to realize them kids had 3 different principals for the last 3 years. So all the school leaders had bailed on them. You also had a group of kids who've had like maybe 2 teachers over their last year when they were in the 6th grade. 1 quit halfway. So, you know what I mean? Listen, when you're dealing with someone with a broken heart, you've got to handle it with care. And you've got to understand that what they're throwing at you is not a reflection of who they are, but a test of who you are. And if you last past that test, they will give you their humanity. And when there's an exchange of humanity, you could teach. An exchange of humanity is the first step towards good teaching. Like, yo, this is me, fam. Like, I'm here. I ain't going nowhere. I love y'all. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, yo, that hurt my feelings when you did that. Like, fam, I'm a real person. I just want to teach you vulnerability and humanity. All of a sudden, you see the shell break. Oh, my bad, miss. My bad, mister. Like, I ain't really mean that. All right, so like, what we going to do to make this work for us, beloved? Like, I just want to teach you some science and math because I think it's popping. You know, let's figure this out together. And once that moment happens, it's an exchange of souls, man. It's a delicate dance of teaching and learning.
Yeah, man. What I'm picturing in my head too, man, what you mentioned in your book, Ratchetdemic, you know, you teaching your class and in comes this kid that just walks in and interrupts.
Man.
You know, so you get that teacher moment where you're like, I need to call security, get rid of this kid. And you're about to call security and you have a real moment, man. So walk us through that, man.
Man, I mean, look, I'm at the board. I'm having probably the best day I've had yet. Kid walks in like halfway into my lesson, proceeds to talk to all his boys and starts shaking their hands and I'm like, yo, fam, I'm like, we're all learning here. What are you doing? And there was a really funny exchange. Like the first time, he looked at me like what? Like, and it's so frustrating when like somebody interrupts your flow and then they looking at you, what I do? And you're like, what did you do? Like, you don't see what's going on. That already raised the temperature. And then I remember telling him, yo, you need to just go back wherever you came from. Like, we learning, just go back wherever you came. And then I remember him telling me like, what? I'm Mexican, like, go back wherever I came from. And like, now the kids are like, yo, you racist, Dr. E? I'm like, nah, I meant where he came from today, not like where he came from culturally. It was a whole thing. It just went left. And I remember going on the phone to call security. I remember him grabbing my arm. Then the hood came out of me. I'm like, yo, don't get it twisted, beloved. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you ain't just gonna run up on a kid and think you know. And like, I flailed my arms back. And it was just this really like, you know, powerful moment. And I remember him, I was like, yo, fall back. You know what I mean? Like, yo, what you doing? And I got the baldy right now. I had, you know, at the time I was having a receding hairline and he was like, fall back like your hairline. And the whole class starts laughing. I was embarrassed, but it's like, it broke the ice though, you know, and it was a human moment. And I always tell teachers, you know, part of my work right now is training teachers and training those who will teach teachers and training folks who want to be those who teach teachers. And literally, man, it's the moments of humanity where good teaching begins. It's like the laughter. Sometimes it's the tears. Somebody make you cry. You know what I mean? It's in sorrow, collective heartbreak. It's in joy. Like, yo, we got the answer right. Yay. But, you know, a teacher has to be a master of the situations where emotions arise. And you have to have the skill set to be able to construct scenarios for particular emotions. And when they happen, you have to know what to do to turn it towards learning. And, you know, I write about that a little bit in Ratchetdemic. I mentioned it for those who want to be science teachers and STEM, STEAM, Make, Dream. And, you know, I got a joint I'm working on right now. I can't give away too much, but, you know, I've gotten to the point in my life and my work and my career where, you know, there's all these trade secrets You know what I mean? Like 20 years of teaching, 20 years of researching, 20 years of observing classrooms, 20 years of having conversations with teachers, doing research with students where like I got a little formula. And it's like, you can't keep the formula forever. So I just like I'm at the point now where I want to share the formula with the world.
Oh, I'm ready for that. I'm ready.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Can't wait to get that, man. We're gonna have to bring you back on for that one.
Let's do it.
So yeah, man. So you're doing your thing, and when did it pop in your head about the hip hop merger with the classroom? And what was the feedback you got on that? Because I've used some music in the classroom. One time I used music, I was getting observed, and person observed me is like, why would you? First off, the music was too loud. Why would you even play music in the classroom in the first place? Like it wasn't professional and all of this stuff.
Hater.
Meanwhile, I'm like, did you not see the kids rocking to and how they got engaged in the I was just like, but yeah. I'm thinking when you talking about merging hip hop and the classroom, I was thinking about some of my experience, and it wasn't great.
Yeah, let me start off by saying this, brother. Don't, I my heart always breaks when people find a thing that makes magic and then somebody else tells them to run away from it. You know what I mean? Like, so, I know, you the whole podcaster now, I mean, you the expert in the game, you know what I mean? But I just want to remind you that just because somebody outside of your classroom doesn't see it, doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Just because the observer of the phenomena lacks the insight to witness the magic doesn't mean the magic isn't happening. And it's important for us to say that to each other. Particularly as brothers, right? Because I write about this in Academic. Our intuitional knowledge sometimes is more powerful than our institutional knowledge. But a person who's functioning only on institutional knowledge just lacks the wisdom to understand the complexity of intuitional knowledge. You know what I mean? Don't fight your intuition. So that's the first thing I say. Second thing I say is this: look, my whole thing is like, I'm not going to fight something that I know is going to win. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're going to win, I'm going to join you. You're not going to win against hip hop. It's been fought by every entity, musically, politically, sociologically, and otherwise since its inception. People used to say, it won't make it past the 70s. It won't make it past the 80s. It's not a real genre. And all hip hop does is keep reinventing itself, because it is, at the end of the day, at the anchor of an Afrocentric existence. Music, rhythm, chanting, orality, and storytelling is who we are as melanated folks. You can't fight the ancestors' message, beloved. It's not going to happen. And yes, hip-hop has been commercialized. Yes, some folks have used it to be able to advocate for things that are problematic, like violence and misogyny. But that's not a hip-hop problem. That's a society problem. Hip-hop is a tool that you can use to be able to emphasize, analyze, or criticize social phenomena. So if hip-hop can advocate for violence, it certainly can also to advocate for education. If it can perpetuate misogyny, it could also perpetuate respect for women. Right. The message is not the tool. The tool is powerful at what it does. Now, if you fail to utilize hip hop for something that is educative, that's not hip hop's problem. That's your problem. If you leave it only to people who are going to use it for something negative, that's not hip hop's problem. That's you giving up your power. So for me, it's like, I'm not going to fight my ancestors' message tool. I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use a thing that's part of our culture to support us educationally. And from the minute I've used hip hop in the classroom, I've not had kids saying, kids not learning, or kids not engaging, or kids not asking questions, or kids not being their best selves. It's always worked. So why not? That's one thing. Also, like, keep it a buck with you. I love it. And if I love it, I'm going to use it. Why do I have to only teach in a way that pains me to teach? The rubrics is trash. The standards are trash. The assessments are trash. I don't like it. If I don't like it, it means the kids are not going to like it. So I'm acting like I like something I don't like to teach the kids who don't like the subject anything I don't like. At the very least, I'm going to be culturally relevant to myself. I always tell teachers, you have to be culturally relevant to yourself before you're culturally relevant to kids. And so that's another thing. And, I've gotten all the critiques. Haters gonna hate, look, I'm in the midst of haters hating. Look, the other, literally a couple weeks ago, my Twitter got hacked. So they hacked. I use Twitter I use Twitter not for clout chasing. Some people do that. That's their thing. I use Twitter to talk to teachers every week, every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. I have a chat. My Twitter got hacked. Not only did my Twitter get hacked, then somebody has made up a Twitter as me, tweeting a bunch of trash. And they're 3 people who are me on Twitter. Yo, that's haters hating. Yeah. Why? Because they don't like the messages being shared. They don't like wisdom being shared. They don't like vulnerability and truth telling. They don't like me calling out the system. But, if you're doing anything worth doing, you're going to get hated on. Somebody going to hate on this podcast. You know that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man.
That's fact. Yep.
So, so if I'm going to use hip hop in a classroom, I'm going to get hated on. People are going to accuse you of things that is not your intention. People are going to attach things to you that's not who you are. But once you are aligned to the divine, don't get me to preaching. I'm about to preach on this whole podcast this evening. You know what I mean? I write about Pentecostal pedagogy, you heard?
Yes, sir.
Once you are aligned to the divine and your purpose is pure, you do what you do. I know why I use hip hop. Because I believe in the culture and I believe in the young people who create the culture. And I believe in the advancement of the culture. And I believe in fighting the co-option of the culture. And so I'm going to use it. And, people want to critique that, so be it. Don't let me get to critiquing the things about the structure of schools that are broken that we keep doing. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
So, we do what we do, bro.
So, you got the hip hop thing going. You're bringing in Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan, all these artists and rappers to come through, kick it, chop it up with the kids. And
yes, Kendrick. We brought Kendrick out to Jersey with my man Brian Mooney to kick it with some kids out there. We brought Master P into a class in Brooklyn to teach about financial literacy. We brought Jizza to teach about science and wisdom and understanding because our MCs are teachers. Mm-hmm. So why not?
So you having all this success at the high school level now after your first years, you connected with the kids and you're doing your thing with hip hop ed and everything. So what made you want to transition into the college setting and not stay in the that middle school, high school setting?
Yo, I could have been in the high school, middle school forever, but my calling was bigger. And I'll be honest with you, man, I didn't want to leave. I miss my kids. I helped to start a school. I literally co-authored the proposal to start the school. Saw the school start and run successfully. My heart was in it. But I also knew that for me to do the work only there when other folks needed it would be selfish. It would have been selfish for me to just stay in that place and do what I did there. I had a story to tell. I had a gospel to share. I had messages to deliver. And I had to pursue a platform to do it. And I also understood that doing that work on that level didn't mean I didn't go back. I'm in schools all the time. You know what I mean? So it didn't mean that I was abandoning my calling. It meant that I was expanding my territory. Let me say that again, because I need to resonate with some folks. Somebody in here listening to hear that. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're not abandoning your mission. You're expanding your territory. Your mission remains the same. But with the expansion of the territory, it gives you more of an opportunity to be able to have the impact that you need. Somebody gonna ask you, yo, Mr. G, why are you doing a podcast? Why don't you just stay in the classroom? That's because I'm expanding my territory. I have other desires in my heart. I have other folks I need to speak to. I have other visions, other missions, other possibilities. And so, I always don't run away from when you're calling. You'll know when you're called to go bigger. You know when you're called back. I've not eliminated from my life cycle that I won't go back to a school. Who knows? As long as I'm divinely aligned, I don't know what the next journey is. Look, I'm a Bronx, Brooklyn kid, New York cat, Columbia University, all that. Here I am in LA, kicking it with people in Compton. You know what I'm saying? It was not in my vision for myself, but when you're called to go, you go. And when you trust that you are aligned to your mission, you know that you can't take a misstep if you follow where you're called to go.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So, as a Black man with a Ph.D. in the educational space, do you feel like it is necessary to be taken seriously? Because I've heard from people myself, like, yo, if you want to be taken seriously, you need to get a PhD. You need to have that educational backup to back up the things you're saying, or people are not going to take it seriously because you're a Black male and there's not that many Black males in education anyway, and all this stuff. So do you feel like it is something that was necessary? And
yes and no.
Did you get a different response after getting your PhD?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Like, in full disclosure and full honesty, the credential affords you the opportunity to create some justification or even like validation to your work. I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't have any value. The PhD does open doors. The PhD does does allow you to be able to have some, I guess, credence or respect or value in certain spaces. So in some ways, yes. In other ways, no. Right? Yo, there's this Jay-Z line. You could change who you are to just the top layer. Man, you are who you was when you got here. Like, you are who you are. The PhD is just a credential. I think there are a lot of suckers running around with PhDs. And you know that they suckers when they speak. And so in that instance, the PhD means nothing. Like, you're a whole lame. You could throw your PhD out there all day long. When I hear you, I know it's trash. Right? In that instance, they got a PhD and they're a sucker. Like, I would say focus more on being somebody who has something to say. And people will listen to you. And if you're somebody who has something to say and you got the credential, then it opens up doors. But I'm not validated by my credential, my title, my position, award. It's nice. But that doesn't validate me. That doesn't, like my identity is not wrapped up in that. Does that make sense, beloved? Like, who I am. Look, like what gives me the most, like, where I feel good about myself is when I know I'm good in any hood. You know what I mean? Like, I'm hood pass verified. You know what I mean? You can see me in the X. You can see me in Bed-Stuy. You can see me in Compton. Like, you could see me in LA. Like, you could see me where you see me. And I'm good. And that, to me, that's my G pass is the ultimate credential. The PhD is a little extra. And you know what I mean? And that's truly, like, I got it because I got it, but it don't define me. Like, and I think that's the way you operate. You get it just because it affords you some things, but it should not be what defines you. It should not be what makes you. It should not be the thing that, by the way, call me doctor. Like, you call me doctor if you want. You don't call me doctor if you want. The only time I use that is when somebody try to play me. You know what I'm saying? If I was talking to somebody like, yeah, and so Chris said, I'm like, no, wait, Dr. Endin said, like, if I need to G check you, I use the PhD. Other than that, the G pass in the hood is much more valuable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was at the barbershop the other day, and one barber was like, yo, you're an educator? I'm like, yeah. It was like, yo, you seem like a regular hood dude.
That's something to be proud of. No, I'm real talk. That's something to be proud of. You know why? Some folks would never get that, right? Like, you would walk into the barbershop and they'd be like, oh, you're not from around here, are you? Oh, you ain't got no pass.
Yeah.
When a barber says, oh, you're at your word, I wouldn't even know that. How that made you feel?
It just made me feel like authentic. You know what I'm saying? Like, just, and it made me think about your book too, because when I first started teaching, I tried to play that whole change up the lingual and code switch and do all of that stuff. And it took, one of my peers to just, grab me by the shoulder and be like, yo, man, just be yourself, man. You know what I'm saying? Just to get back to who I am, because I know in your book, you mentioned too, the story of a Black woman that just completely dove into, attempting to be something that she was not, and it never works, and you get that good feeling back when you're able to do it as yourself,
Yep. Facts. Nothing else to be said. That feeling you described is everything.
Yes, sir. So part of the activism that you have been doing is through your speaking, your research, and your writing. So what made you actually want to get into the writing space? And then, you have bestsellers, you've done a whole bunch of academic research. And I think there is a lot of students, a lot of even educators and a lot of Black parents that have no idea of the issues that Black children are facing in school. So based on some of your research, what are some of the things that you found to be like the red zones in regards to what you've seen in regards to like our kids getting educated nationwide?
Oh man, that's a brilliant question. One of the things that my research has shown me is an affirmation of something I already knew, but I'm now really, really extra hard with it because I now have the evidence that supports my intuition, which is that schools were not designed for the success of Black and brown children. The entire infrastructure of that thing, it ain't for them. This is based on historical research. This is based on experiential research. And this is based on research I've conducted on a wide swath of young people when I talk about their experiences within what you call, quote unquote, traditional schools or the traditional structure of schools. I've even had conversations with parents. I've had people who have successfully graduated from institutions. And when you go back and tie back to describing their experiences in schools, you'll find that they succeeded in spite of the structure, not because of it. It was not designed as it is for our people. It's a heartbreaking thing to say out loud.
But it's true.
But it has to be said. I've also found that despite the fact that the schools, as they're traditionally structured, are not built for the success of Black and brown children and Black children in particular, despite that fact, there are ways to operate within the broken system to allow for emancipation, intellectually, emotionally, and otherwise for our children. Like that's and at the end of the day, that's the beauty of our people. We've known how to make a way out of no way. I'll give you an example. The transatlantic slave trade was not designed for Black people to survive. In spite of that, that horrific experience birthed strength, creativity, resilience, communication skills. Despite the fact that it was not designed for your success, we've made a way out of no way. Despite the fact that the system of education in the United States, as it is traditionally structured, was not built for our children, we have the tools to make a way out of no way. And that's where the hip hop comes in. That's where my research on reality pedagogy comes in, cogenerative dialogues, co-teaching. That's where what I write about with the rights of the body comes in. It's like, we have found a hack of a broken system to make what's not designed for us actually work for our freedom. And that's really the chief outcome of the research. Like, this ain't built for you, yo. And here's some things we can figure out where you can make it work for you, even though it wasn't designed that way.
That is powerful. So you wrote your book for white folks that teach in the hood and the rest of y'all too. And you address a lot of issues within the system and how, a lot of white teachers have been dealing with it. You've spoken to a litany of white educators all around the country before, after the book. Do you think, and then also you mentioned too that education has to do with freedom, like liberating that mind. Do you think that white educators have shown that they want to do that? Are they aware of the issues and are they concerned about it? And then do you think they have the want and the ability to liberate Black minds?
No, but some. And so now, literally, this is the first place I've actually publicly shared this. But this year, literally, I went around the country. I wrote this book, started speaking to white educators. Some of them, I'm like, yo, fam, please quit. like, please leave now. But I encountered some who kind of get it. And so I actually, with my boy Sam Sadell, who works at the design school at Stanford, white cat, we're publishing a volume called From White Folk Teaching the Hood, lessons from the other side. And these are white, it's a bunch of essays from white educators who get it. Because they got to talk to their people. Like, look, Chris Emdin can't keep doing it. To keep it a buck with you, it's work I find myself doing, but I don't want to have to keep telling white folks how to be good for us. Like, get your peoples, talk to your mans. And so we're writing a volume, which is, I edited it to make sure they wasn't saying some nonsense. And I wrote some intros and outros with my boy Sam, but it's from white folks to white folks. So the short answer to a deep and complex and layered question is, I don't think that a majority of white educators in schools understand the responsibility that they have to be drastically different in how they teach. I do think that there is a population within that mass that's moved towards understanding what needs to be done. And it's for that reason that I have curated a bunch of them who get it to put something out for their mans to get it.
Yeah, that's important, man. Because I struggle with it myself as an educator. That question, like, should white folks really be teaching us? And the reality is that they already are. You know what I'm saying? And we have to deal with that reality, even if you think that, Black people, Black educators should be the ones that are teaching us. If we don't have that, then we kind of, there has to be something there in which, what you're doing is telling them like, yo, you messed that up. This is how you fix it. This is how you make it better. And this and that and the third.
Somebody
for the ones
got
that
to
are
do
actually interested.
Yeah, because if not, they're going to go out there being trash. And I'll tell you this too. There's a lot of, and Ratchetdemic, again, right? I write about this. There's a bunch of Black educators with white supremacist ideologies embedded in their consciousness.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And dumb cats need an overhaul and shouldn't be teaching our babies either. And so that's why I say it's really about understanding the consciousness of the individual and in having folks who get it that represent a group, speaking to others within that group to get it so that we can get our babies to be free. Yes,
sir. Before we get further into some of your other books, I want to really break down, what you define to be education. So I know you talk about it being something that is liberating, but you said before you can activate the mind, you have to activate the soul. So how does one get into that activation of the soul when we're dealing with our students?
You asked a question that, I'm going to try to make it as short and sweet because, we ain't got all night, but, that soul work is about understanding self. Who are you? Like as far as family, as far as lineage, as far as faith, whose are you? Why are you on this planet? What moves you? What can you do without? What do you require for your existence? What brings you joy? What activates your laughter? What ignites your passion? Who to be around to be the most comfortable? What kind of music just shakes you to your core? What are you scared of? What do you need to be around all the time? These are questions you got to ask. Like, you want to get to the soul, who you are, you got to erase all the things and ask you questions about you. This is why my teacher preparation work is so important. Like, I'm working on a teacher certification program right now with Lincoln Center. It begins with a deep interrogation of who you are and why you. And once you do that, then you can start teaching. Until you do that, you got to shake away the pretense. For you, you know what I mean? Like that's the first step.
So I get through that, I do that, and then we get to the teaching part. As a teacher, what is my responsibility? Am I distributing information to young people in which they can take exams and prove that they know the information that I gave them? And then as a student, what is my responsibility? Am I jotting down notes and just memorizing definitions and numbers? And what are we supposed to be doing here?
So one of the quotes that I've been associated with that makes its rounds is that education is not memorization. It's the activation of the imagination and a path towards liberation. I want to get to the part of it, of the responsibility of the teacher, the activation of the imagination. That's the teacher's main purpose. And here's the thing. If you can activate the imagination, content knowledge comes like that. So you want a young person, like I taught science, right? I taught physics, I taught chemistry, and I taught math. The work is to introduce the content matter in a way that makes them curious about themselves and the world through what you taught. Once a kid starts thinking deeply about it, they find the content on their own. Like they like, yo, I read this book. Because you gotta make the content sexy to them, so that not long. I promise. I'm gonna close this out in a second. My fault. Edit that part out. Abu, like, yo, how long you gonna be doing this? You've got to make the content so enticing that it awakens their curiosity. And now they can't do anything but imagine how to use it. So I always tell people, like, you're a teacher, your job is mad simple. You just got to make the content sexy. That's it. You just got to make the content something that is attractive and that makes them want to be curious about it and makes them want to imagine themselves engaging with it. That's the teacher's job. The student's job is to not let your curiosities end at the classroom. Yeah. So I went in there, like I showed you how this could be connected to that. I asked questions about this, but didn't give you any answers to it. And you're like, yo, I really want to know more about how to balance that equation to find out how that happens. Oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, well, if you really want to know more and I've awakened your curiosity, I've activated your imagination, it is your responsibility to not let that end once you leave my class. Now go forth in the world and go search on your own. So I don't know if that makes sense. The teacher's responsibility is to activate the imagination and the curiosity. A student's responsibility is to take that imagination and curiosity and extend it beyond the walls of the classroom. Once you get those two things happening, learning happens on its own.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, man.
All right, beloved. We'll get up.
Yes, sir. And tell the wife I appreciate letting you do this.
It's all good. I'll tell her that.
Yeah, man. All right.
All right, King. Peace.
Peace.
So every day I'm going hard. I'm talking business, bank accounts, and credit cards. And somehow we defeat the odds and making sure that no one starves illegal or you had it.